Hello world! Welcome to Learning Java, one byte at a time. This is video 44 in a tutorial series geared at bringing the wonderful wide world of Java to those with little or no programming experience. This video is a continuation of the development of the Booker application, a vehicle appraisal app. In the last video, we finally finished constructing our view class, and in this video we're going to do a small unit test to ensure that everything is working correctly. So first I'd like to jump over here to our Notepad++ application, and you can see here we have all nearly 500 or 600 lines of code for the view class that we've been working on the past couple of videos. And I'd like to go ahead and try to test compile it to see that there are no errors. So we'll jump into our command prompt, and we're going to do a javac-d.star.java to compile this and every other class that we've got so far. And in doing this, we see that we have just a host of errors here. Looks like at least 11 errors. So we just go line by line and figure out what's going on here. And all of these look to be in the view class, which is no surprise because that's the only one that we've made changes to. And so let's go ahead and start here. We'll do a split screen. We'll bring this up here. So the first error we have here is going to be on line 372. And it looks like we are missing a semicolon. It expected a semicolon and there is none there. So let's go ahead and go to line 372. And in fact, what is going on is that we have an extra parentheses. See, I'm trying to return a Boolean value, and for whatever reason, I threw in an extra parenthesis there. So we don't need that. We can get rid of that. And the next error is going to be line 395. It looks like it's also expecting a semicolon, so we'll jump down here to line 395 and see what's going on. And it looks like we have a similar issue as before. There's an extra parenthesis that is not needed, so we will go ahead and get rid of that. Next we have on line 453, it looks like it was expecting a parenthesis and there wasn't any. So on line 453, if I scroll down here, and it looks like I have my opening parentheses, and only one closing parenthesis. So I am in fact missing one right there. And of course, the reason that I'm doing this is if you were coding side by side with me, you're likely to have these same errors. So it's important to figure out what went wrong and to fix it together. Next, we have at line 457 a missing parenthesis. So we'll scroll down here, line 457. And in fact, we do. We have two open parentheses, but only one closing parenthesis. So we'll go ahead and add that in there. After that, line 471, it was also expecting a parenthesis. So line 471, we have the open parentheses twice and then only one closing parenthesis. So let's go ahead and close that out completely there by adding the parenthesis. And line 473, it also expected a parenthesis. So we'll check that out. It looks like it was in fact missing a closing parenthesis there. We'll add that in. And then in line 499, also expecting a closing parenthesis. So going through this whole class, I can tell that I was being a little bit sloppy here. This is pretty. These are pretty easy things to put in there. So I have to do a better job of making sure that we don't miss this easy stuff. Line 501, a closing parenthesis missing. We'll add one right there. And then it looks like line 545, it was also expecting a closing parenthesis. The good news is that the debugger that Java has in the Java virtual machine is actually really good at catching these errors, and not only catching them, but pointing out exactly where and what the error is. You can see here it's going to point right to the spot that it was expecting that parenthesis to make it easy for us. Line 545, and we were in fact missing a parenthesis there, so let's go ahead and add that in. After that, line 547, also missing a parenthesis after the luxury class right there. We'll add that parenthesis in. And then line 561, missing parenthesis after the 100. So it's going to be 561, and we're missing one right there. So we'll close that out completely. And it looks like it was all of the 11 errors that we had, so we'll go ahead and save this file and try to run this one more time. Okay, so it looks like we have a couple more errors. These errors look to be all in the view class, and so that'll make it easy. So it looks like we have the first error right here, line 78. Cannot find symbol jpanel, and that's jpanel with a lowercase p. So the mistake is, of course, that the class name is jpanel with an uppercase p, so that's why it doesn't know which one I'm talking about. So we'll open that back up, and we'll go to line 78. And we'll change that to a JPanel with a capital P right there. Easy fix. And it looks like the next error is going to be in line 303. Cannot find symbol vehicle mode text field, and that should of course be vehicle model text field. And it looks like I have a similar error in line 449, vehicle mode text field. So we'll change 303 and 449. .303 vehicle model text field, and then 449 is also misspelled as vehicle mode, so we'll change that to vehicle model text field. Takes care of those errors. The next error is going to be in line 520. Cannot find symbol set vehicle previous owners enabled. And this one in 522 is equally troubled, cannot find set vehicle previous owners enabled. And so we're making a call to the setter class. So let's go to line 520 and 522 and see which ones they're calling that it can't find. So 520, set vehicle previous owners enabled. And so it's referencing this setter up here, which I've got listed as set previous owners enabled, should be set vehicle previous owners enabled. So that's going to be an easy fix. I will modify that to say set vehicle previous owners enabled, and that should take care of both of these because they were both referencing the same method that was not spelled correctly. And if I jump back in here, looks like we have, looks like that's all of the errors. So let's go ahead and save this one more time, and we'll see if this compiles. All right, perfect. So the class compiled. So it looks like those are all the compilation errors. Now what we need to do is write a small unit testing class to see if we can test the view, bring it into view, make it visible, and probably write the action event methods that will capture the action events whenever we click the 4 or 5 buttons that we have there. So I'll jump in here. I'm going to open up a new file that we'll call test.java. Call this one viewtest.java. All right, and so this first needs to be included in the correct package, so we'll make sure to include the package booker. And since our view class has action event listeners and the action event class, or the action event events that we need to capture, we need to go ahead and import those from the AWT class. So we're going to import java.awt. First, the action event that we're going to capture, and then we'll import from the AWT package the action listener so that we have a way of listening for those events that we can then capture. And next, we'll just do a public, let's do view test. We'll make this a public class view test. And then in this class, let's go ahead and define our view. So we'll call a static view that we're going to name view, and it's going to be equal to a new view. And that's just going to instantiate the view class that we have finally finished writing right here. And once we've instantiated that view class, let's go ahead and define a main method as an entry point. Like so. And in this main method, we will go ahead and instantiate the listeners for the 4 buttons that we've created. So let's reference our view, and in the view class we have a vehicle previous owners checkbox listener. And I'll show you where that is. If we jump over here to the view class, down at the very bottom is where we've set methods for all of our action listeners. We have a vehicle previous owners checkbox listener, which captures, which is an action listener, which is passed through a listener event, and then that is added to the view class upon instantiation. We also have a generate add button listener. We have a new button listener. We have a save button listener, a load button listener, and then what we'll do is we'll actually use this display alert method to verify that all the listeners are working. So after we instantiate the class and then we assign the methods that will capture the events that these listeners throw, we'll have the display alert just throw a little message on the screen that the listener is working. And so you'll notice that all of these listeners are actually referenced by their buttons, but the actual events that we're going to capture are going to be defined by methods that are going to reference just the listener events themselves. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do view.vehicle previous owner's checkbox listener to capture that listener, and then whenever the listener is activated, we're going to call a new vehicle previous owner's listener. Not the checkbox listener, but our own method that we're going to instantiate here. And we're going to do the same thing for the other buttons, so we'll do view, we'll reference the action listener that's in the class, so that's going to be a view save button listener, and we'll pass through an instantiation of our own class, which is going to be a new vehicle save listener. And if this doesn't make sense, just hang tight. It'll all kind of come together here in a moment. Then we're going to reference the vehicle load button listener. These are the listener methods that are instantiated. They're part of the view class, and they're being instantiated whenever the view object is being instantiated. And then we're going to instantiate our own method, or our own class, which is going to actually handle that listener. And this one's going to be called vehicle load listener. The classes that we're going to instantiate to handle the listeners are going to be here in this testing class. Normally they'd be part of the controller class, but we haven't finished the controller object yet, or the controller class yet. So just for testing purposes, we're going to go ahead and do some real basic classes here just to kind of handle those event listeners to make sure that they're even working. So that's going to be the load button. So now we'll do the vehicle generate add button listener. And this one will be our own class that we'll call vehicle generate add listener, like so. And then next we'll do the vehicle new button listener. And this will pass through an instantiation of our own vehicle new listener, like that. Okay, and then finally we're going to take our view object that we've instantiated, and we're going to set the visible equal to true so that it actually shows up on the screen. Alright, so what we've done is we've instantiated the view object from the view class that we finished in the last couple of videos here as a static reference, because this is going to be part of our testing class. Then we've used the main method as the entry point, and within the main method we're referencing the view instantiation that we've created up here as a static instantiation, and we're accessing its listeners and then passing through the listeners classes that we're going to create that are actually going to handle those events that happen whenever the listener catches the event. And then finally we're setting the visibility of that view object equal to true so that it actually shows up on the screen. So now the only thing we have left to do is to actually come up with those classes that are going to handle the listening events. And these are all going to be static classes. These are going to be member classes, so they're going to be classes within classes. It's going to be a static class. I think we've decided to call it vehicle previous owner's listener. And these classes are going to implement the action listener. And the action listener is a class that we've imported right here. And this class has one method that must be overwritten as an interface. It needs to be overwritten, and it's the action performed class. The action performed method. And this method is returns void, but the method will actually perform some sort of action whenever that listener captures the event. And so this vehicle previous owner's listener class that we're going to instantiate right here, whenever the view previous owner's checkbox listener captures an action event, is going to implement the action listener interface, which has the one method that must be overridden, which is essentially handle the action. And so we're going to do an annotation to override it right here, and then it's simply called action performed. And so it's going to be a public void action performed. It accepts an action event, which we've also imported. And we're going to call that E for the event. And whenever this event happens, we're just going to access the view object that we've instantiated and use the display alert method to pass a quick message to the screen that says previous owner's event. And that's just going to let us know that the listener heard the event, captured the event, passed it through to this class, and we know that it's working. And that's pretty much all we have to do, but we're going to do that for all of the event listeners. So next we'll do a static class, which is going to be our vehicle save listener. This one implements action listener. And because it implements it, it has to override the method action performed. It accepts an action event that we'll call E. And whenever this happens, we're just going to display alert that the save event happened. And that's all we're going to do for that one. Next, the static class for the vehicle load listener, which also implements action listener, and because of that has to override the method action performed, which accepts an action event called E. And when it does so, we're going to display alert that a load event happened. And then we'll do a static class for vehicle generate add listener. And this implements action listener. And therefore overrides the action performed method, which needs an action event that we'll call E. And then when this happens, we'll access the view item that we instantiated, and we will have it display an alert generate add event. Okay, and then I believe, oh no, we have one for the new button, so let's do that one. That's going to be another static class, vehicle new listener. Make sure that we implement the action listener and override the action performed method, which is expecting an action event that we're going to call E. And when it does, we're going to access the display alert method in the view object, and we'll call it new event. Okay, so our testing class looks to be complete. Not only is it going to instantiate the view class and then make it visible so we can see it, but we've also attached action listeners to all of the buttons, everything that needs an action listener in that class. And whenever these events are passed through, it will display an alert letting us know which one of the actions happened. And so it looks like everything here is good. Let's go ahead and save this. And we'll jump into our command prompt, and barring any errors, of which it looks like we have 22. So if we jump in here, let's see exactly what's going on. Most of these look like duplicate errors. 18, line 25, line 20, line 32. Method does not override or implement a method from a super type. So this is certainly strange because I do remember overriding the methods. Let's see what might be going wrong here. And I think that what the mistake that I made here is I've imported this from the java.awt.action event, when in fact this should be java.awt.event.action event. So I did not access that sublibrary properly. So let's parse that correctly. So java.awt.event.actionListener and then event.actionEvent. So I think that might have actually been the case there. So let me save this. Let's go back and try to recompile this entire thing here. Yes, okay, so those two little misimports were actually the source of all 22 errors. That's an easy fix. So now, let me try to run the view test class. All right, excellent. So what we have here is our view object that was instantiated and then made to be visible. And the only thing that I'm noticing is the icon is not present, which if I double check here, I believe that I have that sourced as logo.png in the Booker directory. So if I go back to the source code and check out the view class where we're actually naming that icon, it looks like it's called here icon.png when in fact it was the file logo.png. And I could of course use an absolute path, and it would probably be recommended if there's going to be any sorts of internal packages or projects or anything like that. But for now, I think this will just work just to access it directly because it is in the same class. Let me save that as logo.png so that it's actually the right icon. We'll close this down because we're not going to need that. And let me try to recompile this. And then I will try to rerun the view test, which now looks like it's working. There's the logo that I was expecting. And then we have all of the view elements, the project name label, the project name text field, the new project button, the load project button. We have the text field for, looks like we're missing the label here for make. So we'll have to look into that, see what's going on there. But we have the model, the base cost year. We have the radio buttons that are properly grouped together so that only one can be selected for the transmission. And likewise for the drive. We also have the checkboxes for the rear view camera, ABS, and airbags. Looks like the grade radio buttons are also working correctly. And then we have the keyless entry, premium sound, and GPS checkboxes. The class radio buttons are properly grouped together, and the accident history checkbox. So the only thing that we're missing is to check to see if the action listeners are properly set for the button. So if we click new button, it should come up with the display alert that says the new event happened. And if we do, here we go, new event. Let's check the load project. This says load event, so that looks like it's working correctly. The generate add event came up. And then finally, the save project event came up. So perfect. So the event listeners are working correctly. The view object is working correctly. We just need to check the make label to find out what happened with that. And so I've noticed that the make label is actually down here where the mileage label should be, and up here I have no label at all. So probably what happened was the autofill mistakenly labeled the mileage label as the make label. So that's probably what happened. If I jump back in here, and it looks like when we were setting the constraints and attaching the view items, the first make label looks like it got properly attached, but down here I see it again in a spot that should have the vehicle mileage label, and so probably just a mistake with the autofill. Let's go ahead and change that to vehicle mileage label and save that, and we're going to recompile this. Let me close down this first one here and recompile that and rerun it. And there we go. Okay, so it looks like it's there where it needs to be, the make label, and this is properly labeled as mileage. And so, wow, that was a very long class to write, but look, it is an incredible object right here. We've got something that looks nice and polished. It has action event listeners that are working correctly. And so now the only things left to do are to create the controller class and the model class, and then probably a small launching class. And so we are coming up on the tail end of this project. It's looking like it's going to work. So hopefully this was fun and entertaining. Of course, the completed code is available in GitHub. That's going to be found from a link in the description. And look forward to seeing everyone back again in the next video. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful night.